at this time, I'd like to acknowledge a few people that are here. First of all, can we give a round of applause to the Macaulay Musicians Collective? They're all students at Macaulay College, so this is all part of CUNY. Thank you, Afradaba, for that. Also, we have a number of groups here today that decided to join us. If I can have all of the Leeds counselors stand up. Be acknowledged. Our Leeds programs and representatives are here. Thank you, Leeds. Do we have any COPE directors? Okay, that's all right. We'll get the next one. And certainly, again, if I can acknowledge the Career Services Association of CUNY for helping to put all of this together. A round of applause for them as well. And the back of your program, you can now be a part of discussions with us through LinkedIn. So if you look at the back of the program, please start to use that site. We certainly encourage you to dialogue with us, to know what we're doing and to hear about what you're doing as well. New York Needs You, one of our partners at CUNY and at many of your career centers, provides prestigious internships at different companies and organizations, mentoring opportunities with industry professionals, and we're pleased to have members of New York Needs You here with us as well. We have Mariana Tu, VP of Technology and Career Development Programs, and Ashley Prince, Coordinator of Technology and Career Development Programs. Thank you for being here with us today. I understand that your Chief Executive Officer, PJ Kim, may join us as well. So we're really happy that you're here because our Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs is a part of the Advisory Board Committee. So again, this is our partnerships. These are one of the examples of what we do here at CUNY, reaching out to different organizations that also reach out to us, but to hear more about what the career services is involved in. So in keeping with our collaborative efforts, our next speaker is the Associate Director for Vault, also known as Career Insider. And Career Insider, which is powered by Vault, is a unique service. It's the only online career information resource that gives students access to Vault's collection of career guidebooks, as well as company profiles, career advice articles, and employer ranking derived from Vault's proprietary survey process. Career Insider is the sole provider of such unique content to colleges, universities, and other education-based organizations. And I'm happy to say that Vault has been a partner here at CUNY for over 10 years. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Matthew Kasparian, who will present different aspects of this product. Matthew?
I want to thank Zena for making my sales pitch for me so I didn't have to be the mean vendor to stand up here and shill a product. How is everyone today?
Great.
Let me just adjust this microphone here. There we go. So I had the good fortune of taking part in a panel this morning for the Accounting, Finance, and Insurance group. I have to say, it was a lot of great information, and what really made me feel good about being part of this collective, being part of this conference, is that the information that's being shared among the career services coordinators and among the employers is progressing in the same way that it is across the country. Career services coordinators all around the world are starting to understand the importance of involvement. They're starting to understand the importance of developing good skill sets, both from a professional and personal basis. The reality is we're dealing with student populations nowadays that continue to think the degree affords them the job. You go to college, you get a degree, and oh, I'm guaranteed a position. And the reality is that's just not the way it actually works. So what do we do? How do we actually manage those expectations? What can we do for students to provide them with the right skill sets, and more importantly, the right attitude to make them more successful in the job market. Now, there are all sorts of ways that we're going to do that we can approach this sort of scenario. You'll hear a little bit later about using social media to achieve job success in the market. But I am actually focusing on one very particular factor that perhaps none of you may have ever realized, and that's the importance of culture fit. Now, we'll start with something a little bit lighter. Lunch presentations, aren't they great? Right? You get to sit there and eat, and I get to stand here and try not to bore everyone out of their turkey wraps. But I mean, let me ask you a question. Let's say you were offered free lunch at your workplace. Would that improve your daily mood? Would that make you more liable to be more motivated? Now, granted, I should probably ask if any of you already receive free lunch at your offices, but I don't want to ask anyone to raise their hands while they're eating, and we'll be all jealous of you anyway, so I'm not singling anyone out. But if you were faced with multiple opportunities, and one of those opportunities were to say, offer you free lunch, would that sway your decision? What if it was for an employer that you may not have been as enthusiastic about? What if it was a position that perhaps did not align itself with your interests? Well, that's something that we think about at Vault. Let's talk about feelings for a second. Job satisfaction these days is actually becoming more and more important to the job seeker. People are going out there, and of course compensation and benefits, of course prestige is still an important factor when it comes to employment decisions. But what we are seeing, and as the benefit of being a survey and employment data company, we can see this sort of thing, quality of life factors are actually taking more and more of a stand at the forefront of what job seekers are looking for. They want work-life balance. Did anyone read that Atlantic article about having it all? That was a big thing that happened. Everyone is concerning themselves now not just with who is willing to hire me. The power is now flipping, as it should, because employers are out there in the market, no matter whether it's up or down or all around. It should no longer be about us considering who is willing to hire me. I will put my resume out, I will put my skills out, I will market myself as best as possible, and hopefully I will land an employer. The thing is, remember when we all applied for colleges? We didn't do that for colleges. We had the really good college, the pipe dream college, the safe college. We diversified. Job seekers have to diversify in order to see success, especially in a tight community such as New York City. There are so many employers out there, but they're being more selective about the kind of candidates that they're taking in. And to that reason, job seekers are starting to understand the importance of taking into account factors they may not have previously thought about. Factors like opportunities for growth, internal training, relationships with supervisors. Who ever thought about that going into a job? Promotion policies, benefits, and of course, compensation, benefits, travel requirements, things like that. And it's good that job seekers are starting to pay attention to these factors because the employers are starting to pay attention to them just as much. In fact, the concept of culture fit has become so important that employers are actually starting to do things like psychological profiles, emotional assessment tools. They're looking at credit reporting to determine the reliability of potential job candidates. This is something we have to pay attention to because, as I heard throughout the morning, throughout the panel that I was at earlier today, every job seeker that's out there is not just a GPA. They're not just a resume. They're not just their extracurricular activities. They are a well-rounded collection of skills, experience, and education, but they're also a collection of values. And so when your graduates are going out there, when they're getting out into the job market, they don't just have to consider what kind of job they want to do, or perhaps where they want to do it, but now they have to take into account who do they want to do it for. Why does that matter? I mean, we're talking about a market that is a little bit tight these days. There are some employers that are expanding, but we're focused here today to talk about making students marketable, making them employable. Why should they think about who they want to work for when we should consider, well, are they being offered anything to begin with? There's a reason for that. In a recent issue of American Sociological Review, they did a story linked to the research of Professor Lauren Rivera over at Northwestern University. And I quote, they said, companies are choosing new hires in a manner more closely resembling the choice of friends or romantic partners. Romantic partners. Did you ever think you'd see a day when speed dating and job interviews were handled the same way? Right? But the reality is, all of you are involved to a certain extent with promoting your students, with getting them out there, making them more marketable, giving them the professional and personal skill sets necessary to land the positions that they want. You're doing interview practice, resume and cover letter development. You're giving them perhaps interest and skill assessments. But what's the next step? If you are pushing out a cadre of new graduates that have the same skill sets, technical and interpersonal and specialties in various fields and industries, what differentiates themselves as individuals? We're not trying to market a group of students en masse. All of them are individual job seekers and thus should be treated uniquely. So how do you actually put out that uniqueness? How do you make sure that employers understand you're not getting a group of CUNY students, you're getting this student who is an ambitious go-getter that can focus on very structured tasks. You're getting this student who will do what it takes. I heard a great story earlier at the accounting and finance panel about persistence. Someone who will go time after time after time and do whatever it takes to land the position and see success in it. Taking that piece of the puzzle and seeing where it fits in the larger organization. Well, working for Vault as I do, we have the benefit of being able to see what people are saying about the employers, and on the flip side, what the employers are saying about their potential candidates. You'd be really fascinated to know, you can tell a lot about a company based on the sort of requirements they put for potential job candidates. I'm going to scroll through a few quotes that I've actually seen in the past year. Surveys give you some very, very interesting quotes. For instance, for this sales position, the person said, "We're looking for a sales maniac, someone who will take our ambitious quotas and laugh at them." This was not me, by the way. I just want to make that clear. What about this finance interview? "We don't have time to micromanage, so you're encouraged to go rogue and think outside the box." I mean, what kind of language is this? This is an interview. What about this, accounting interview? "There's an established chain of communication here, and if you stray even a bit outside the lines, you'll never get anything done because no one will respond to you." Now, I can tell you from an accounting background, I started in accounting, this is very true. But is this the kind of thing, when your students come to you and say, "Should I work in accounting?" What do you talk to them about? You talk to them about, are you good with pattern analysis? Are you good with numbers? Are you tech savvy with Excel and Microsoft applications? Do you tell them, maybe you should consider how comfortable you are existing in a structured environment, a corporate environment, where you have to communicate in a very procedural process, otherwise nothing will ever happen? Is that something they ever consider? Maybe it's something they should. And of course, we get a few funny ones in the bunch. I've never ever heard anyone in an interview say, "Do you prefer Star Wars or Star Trek?" That's an interesting one. And just for the record, I'm an Android man, so I don't know what that would mean for my job prospects in that case. But I mean, there's a point within the seriousness and the silliness of the survey data itself, and that's companies are being a lot more critical about candidates. And they should be, because the overhead on new hires is growing higher and higher and higher. So companies are focusing so much more on culture fit. When you sit down in an interview room with a possible recruiter, they're not just concerned with how great your grades are, although that is a minimum level for a lot of employers these days. They're not just concerned with what activities you did in school or how many sports you played. What they want to know is if they place you in the seat with the rest of that company, how well you'll fit. Will you be miserable in a week? Will they be miserable in a week? It's an important factor to keep in mind. This, right up on the screen, is our Revolt Job Satisfaction Survey. We do this every single year, as I mentioned before, and it gives us some really good insight. We talk about things like hiring trends, employment, and obviously we talk about job satisfaction. And the reason why job satisfaction matters is that it gives us some real insight on what people are paying attention to. And things have actually changed over the course of years. There are a couple of things that I like to point out when it comes to our survey. First of all, do your students know that no matter how idealist they are about whatever industry position they're going into, they are likely to experience a dip in job satisfaction within the first year? The first year. I mean, that looks a lot like your marriage, but I'm kidding. I'm very happy with that. But within the first year, they experience a dip in job satisfaction, and we're looking at averages here, so it's not wholly significant, but it's enough to notice. And you'll notice that the upward trend is not nearly as fast, not nearly as rapid as the downfall was. It's not until they accumulate around 5 to 7 years of experience that they actually start to attain that same level or even close to that level of job satisfaction. And the funny thing is, when you get to that point, 5 to 7 years, it's mostly not because of the ideals. It's not because of the flash or the prestige of the position, but it's more about understanding yourself and how you align with the larger group, with the larger organization, with the larger industry. And it's very interesting to see that because it takes time. Do your students know that it takes time to actually build the experience? This is not something that you can skip. You actually have to stick with a position, to stick with an industry, to accumulate enough knowledge, wisdom, and experience to actually be satisfied at it. So what affects your ability to actually stick with a certain position, to stick with a certain industry? Well, the other thing that we noticed is we asked employees what factors they took into account when they originally chose their position. And you can see we have a bevy of things here. And besides the obvious that those who took jobs that were the only offer received are less than satisfied, it's very interesting to see that firm culture and business outlook, those who did the work, who did the research on companies to find out what their culture was and how they aligned with it, and also the overall health and prospects of that particular organization, those people tend to be more satisfied with what they do, which sort of makes sense, right? If you know what you're getting into, you're less likely to be dissatisfied. It's a very important point. So we know that employers are focusing more on creating these dynamic, aligned teams that focus on a particular culture idea that they've built. We know that students and job seekers are paying more attention to that as well, not only because they want to be happy overall, but because they want to achieve success in the job market. And a lot of that has been said, I'm sure, in other panels throughout the day. You have to sit there and say, who am I to this organization? Why should you hire me? Not solely based on my skills or experience, but based on who I am, what makes me different. So how do you make this information work for you? Well, at Vault, we like to advocate a lot of things that you're already doing. Promote self-evaluation. Make sure that the students and job seekers out there continue to do self-evaluation, whether it be skills and interest assessment, make sure they focus on values, start early. When we talk about doing research, it's not just research on the outside world, but do research within. Find out who you are and what matters to you. Think about the factors that actually affect you in your daily life, in your education, your family, whatever work or previous intern experience they might have had. This collection of words here actually comes from a survey, another survey that we do, where we ask people to give us comments on what factors actually matter most to them in terms of positive elements of their company. And then, of course, on the flip side, you want to recognize the things that you try to avoid. I like how ours is the most popular one, by the way. Apparently no one thinks they actually have to put in the work, but that's what it is. This is an important thing to do. Self-assessment takes time, but every step of this whole process takes time and is just as important. If they don't know who they are, if they cannot establish a personal and professional brand, then they'll be lost in the process. They'll be essentially selling a shell without really knowing what meat lies within. So once they establish a personal and professional brand, they know who they are, they've established their values, they've created factors that matter to them in the workplace. What do you do with it? Well, you have to go out and make a baseline comparison. Let's look at employers that actually, the Go Moneyball thing. Did anyone see Moneyball? It was not only was it a great movie, I'm actually not much of a baseball man myself, but Moneyball made a very excellent point, and that is, when you feel overwhelmed by larger abstract concepts, one of the best things you can do is quantify them. Come up with a metric, come up with an analysis, a way of actually listing down and taking things that might not be as comfortable and making them comfortable with numbers. I never think I'd say that math is good in that case, but it is. Moneyball used this concept of sabermetrics, where, well, I'll just give you this little backstory. This baseball team, the Oakland A's, was starving for talent, and they also did not have the resources to spend on big hitters, star players. So what they did was decide to create a metric system where they evaluated potential recruits based on the factors that actually mattered to them. Not star power, but more things like on-bat percentage, how many times they got on base, their hit percentages, things like that. Actual quantifiable factors that they could then apply and rank potential recruits based on those baseline factors. Now, employers are already doing this sort of thing. They're using technology to weed out keywords from your resumes. They're using credit analysis, as I said before, to check reliability. So why couldn't your students apply metrics analysis to potential employers? And I'm not saying taking job ads from the newspaper and saying, okay, well, this company's hiring and this company's hiring. I'm talking more along the lines of, I've identified who I am. I've identified the industry and profession that aligns with who I am. Now let's identify companies that are within that space. Once you've identified those companies, you can then take the ranked factors that you have here, and you notice I've taken pretty much the most complete list that I have for myself, but it can be as short or as long as you want based on how you self-identify. And what you do is, essentially, this is a very simple thing. All of you have probably done something to this effect in the past. You apply a weight based on what's most important to you or least important to you on that list. And then you take each potential employer. Notice I'm talking about this in terms of potential employer. The power should be flipped to who am I willing to put myself out for? So if you take each potential employer and you rank them based on those individual factors, weight times the score, add them up, you create a total. And you notice at the bottom there, that total score, that total evaluation, it seems like just a simple number, but the reality is, it gives you two major pieces of information. First, how likely you are to enjoy or be satisfied working for that organization. Now granted, again, this is a simple method, but having some level of evaluation is better than none at all. The other piece of information it gives you is how effective you are likely to be selling yourself to this organization. If you're likely to be more satisfied working for a particular company, aren't you also more likely to be more enthusiastic, energetic, motivated during the interview? You're more likely to do the necessary research to make sure you secure a position. You're more likely to be persistent. I mean, I could say this all day, but the thing is, all of us understand that if you want something, you put the necessary energy into it. And this is a great way of just giving you a baseline evaluation of how likely you are to want it. Seems pretty simple, right? Well, Vault actually does something like this to evaluate companies when we rank them every year. It's a slightly different process, but we do that. Now, it seems pretty simple to rank companies based on individual factors that matter to you, but the reality is, how do you go about getting that information? Now, I heard this a lot in the panel that I attended this morning. I hope all of you heard it in other panels as well. Do your homework. The students have to go out. The amount of information that's out there is absolutely staggering, and the kind of connectedness that we have these days allows us to tap into channels of information that we may not have had before. I'm going to briefly plug the fact that all of you in this room have access to Vault's Career Insider. It's a database, it's a research analysis tool, it provides career topic guidebooks that allow you to go from a broad range career search to a more directed companies, industries, and professions search. So there's information there, but it doesn't have to be from Vault. You can get it through Bureau of Labor Statistics, you can evaluate companies through their websites. Encourage your students to ask for yearly and annual reports. Tell them to imagine that getting a job is like investing in a company. I mean, what's more valuable to invest than your time and expertise? Make sure they know what they're talking about. But they can also find other channels. I mean, all of you, to some extent, are promoting the idea of peer networks, mentor programs, taking advantage of alumni, making sure that you have personal connections. Well, we like to sort of call it knowing a guy who knows a guy. Well, we do that. However you get that information, it's important to have that information, because that is really the only leverage point that you have when you get out there into the job market. You have yourself, but the way that you place yourself as a marketable candidate to all of these employees, to all these particular organizations, is by saying, I know what I'm talking about. Think about it this way. Candidate A sits in an interview room and says, well, I looked at your website and I see that you do this and it looks interesting. Candidate B sits down in an interview room and says, okay, from my research I understand that you promote ambitious team players who focus on non-structured, ambitious thought processes. I'm the guy for you. Candidate B obviously did their homework, they know what they're talking about, and even if they're wrong, even if they're sitting in a room with an interviewer who doesn't agree with that perspective, at least there was effort put forth, as I like to call it, showing that you care. You show that you care, you show that motivation, you show that energy, it makes a difference. And then you're standing there with an applicant that not only knows themselves, they know the factors that matter to them, they know the employers that are likely to align with those culture, with those values, with those interests, with those skills. What do you do then? Well, at this point, I'd actually pass it on to you guys. This is the point at which all of those practical professional development skills matter. resumes, the cover letters, the actual social and professional networking, getting out there, getting your name recognized, doing internships, getting involved in the organizations themselves. So, just to go over everything quickly, the concept today is the idea of understanding who you are, not just from a skills and interest perspective, but also from a culture and value perspective. Once you recognize that, you're able to leverage that not only into understanding the employers that are more likely to provide you with that kind of satisfaction so that you can actually stick with the job long enough to achieve that higher level of satisfaction, but also it gives you a perspective on how likely they are to be motivated to hire you. The fact that you can say, I am the right piece for this puzzle. I am the right fit for this company. The rest is up to you. Thank you, guys. I would be happy to take questions now if you want to do that. Absolutely. Anyone? I know I blew you away. It's crazy. Or it's the raps. It could be the raps. All right, thank you.
1, 2, test.
Thank you, Matthew. Our next guest that's here, when he found out that this conference was taking place, I sent it out to a lot of different areas, and the first response that I got back was, make sure I'm there. Make sure this is on my calendar. And I was taken aback because that was from my boss, the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs. But it really just spoke to his commitment to the work that you do and really showing how he will continue to support and provide resource to the work that we all do. I'll just read briefly his bio. In January 2011, Dr. Frank Sanchez was appointed as the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at the City University of New York. For over 20 years, Dr. Sanchez has worked to advance campus student services, programs, and policies aimed at increasing student services and degree completion. From 2005 to 2010, Dr. Sanchez was the Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and Chief Student Affairs Officer at the University of Colorado, Denver. During his tenure, Dr. Sanchez led the establishment of several new student services, including a Dean of Students, campus housing, veteran student services, community standards, and wellness, as well as provided the primary leadership for consolidating all centralized student services at the downtown Denver and Anschutz Medical Center campuses. I'd like to present to you now my boss, Dr. Frank Sanchez.
Zena and the team of folks who put this together. I appreciate the work that you've done to put this group of folks together, but more importantly, what I appreciate is the conversation that you're having at this conference. This morning I spent, in fact this afternoon I'm going to go back to another meeting actually here at John Jay, and I spent the morning with Dr. John Gardner, who's considered one of the nation's leaders in terms of student success and retention on college campuses. And what I appreciate out of that time spent this morning and the time that you're spending today is that we are taking time to engage in conversation, maybe debate, about what really matters for the success of our students. How do we really prepare students for this global marketplace, and not only to prepare them, but how do we make them competitive? And that's something that I think is incredibly important when you think about, for a long, long time, American higher education has really been an engine for economic development. We've always said that. But I'll tell you, as we have experienced the latest challenges with the economy, I think now than probably any other time in our history, I think higher education really can become that engine, maybe even that turbo engine for economic development. If we can begin to identify those new industries, in those new areas of growth within our economy, and truly, in a real way, and in a meaningful way, connect our college students with those new industries so that our college students really can be the leaders of our world going forward within private industry. Let me just quickly get a show of hands of the companies that are here. What are the companies, partners, folks working with? I see one kind of hand, another hand. Just for a minute, I want to talk a little bit about our CUNY students. Being in student affairs, I like talking about our amazing students here. But, you know, our students at CUNY, what CUNY has become is really a clearinghouse for global talent at CUNY. And just take for a moment here. This past fall, we enrolled over 272,000 students across 24 campuses. Our students speak 130 different languages and come from 205 different countries. Now, when we think about the future of this global industry that we're all working in, I can't think of a better place to recruit talent than a place like CUNY. I mean, after all, private industry is about talent acquisition. You know, you have talent acquisition positions. Well, higher education for decades, in fact centuries, has been all about talent development. What we need to do is sit down together and try to figure out, understand what the specifications are for companies, and to deliver that talent in a meaningful way. I think companies going forward are going to rethink their pipelines for acquiring talent. And I'll just share with you one quick example. You know, JP Morgan Chase, for example, has a very large branch, kind of headquarters in Brazil, right? Well, they need, obviously, students with business, finance, and accounting degrees to be effective in the entry-level, middle, and upper-level management. I'm pretty sure JP Morgan Chase isn't going to go to the Standard, maybe the Harvard, or the Princetons, or the Yales to get top talent, because they need individuals with the cultural competencies and the linguistic skills to be effective in Brazil. And not to mention, they're likely not going to find a large number of students at those premier institutions that have those skill sets. Whereas a place like CUNY, I could probably provide JP Morgan Chase with several handfuls of students who speak Portuguese and have the cultural, again, competencies to be effective in the management and the leadership of JP Morgan in Brazil, or China, or India, the Middle East. You can go on and on. And so I think the future of this global economy is going to force industries to rethink where they find talent. Yes, you need the discipline and the skills, whether that's engineering, technology, finance, accounting, but you're going to need to have the cultural skills to be globally competitive. And I think this is where CUNY is really going to, in the future, be able to provide an incredible service to private industry all over the world, because we have become this clearinghouse of global talent. I think I want to speak just a little bit to our Career Center folks that are here. I know a number of you who work in our Career Centers are here today. I think right now you have many, many opportunities in our Career Centers for a number of reasons. Nationally, Career Centers are being focused on, and I think functionally are having to rethink and reimagine how they do business at our colleges and at our universities. A couple of examples. I know nationally now, Career Centers are being a focus because presidents are valuing them more. You see that in new jobs suddenly coming up where you have vice presidents of career services and workforce development. You have vice presidents and special assistants to presidents specifically looking at career services and that bad P word, placement, but really looking at training and development. this is a new phenomenon, I think in part because of the economy, but I'll tell you, it's an incredible opportunity for our career centers to suddenly find themselves a real focal point of your college's administration and the leadership. So that's one opportunity. With that, for our career centers, when there is focus, when someone is making you a priority, it's an opportunity for more resources. You know, at CUNY, we know what it means to be resource poor. But career center folks, let me tell you, you have an incredible opportunity once you get recognized at the highest level of leadership on your colleges to begin to bring in more resources, which then requires you to take advantage of another opportunity. And that is to rethink and create a new mental model for how you impact and support and serve your students on your campus, and to really make them globally competitive, and to give them the skills and the competencies to get those jobs that may be all over the world. You know, I think one of the ways that I think our career centers, and some of you I know are doing this, but I think more of you are going to have to think this way. I think it's one thing to serve in a way that is very career directed. You get a student who comes in and says, I want to be a teacher, or I want to be an engineer, or I want to work in applied health. And you give them the pathway. You direct them on, well, here are the potential job opportunities, but here's more or less what you got to do. I think over time that has to take a little shift. And I think instead of the career-directed approach, I think it's going to have to be much more career-guided, where you have the actionable intelligence of workforce development and data that your state and your city has to tell that student, hey, if you want to stay in New York City and work in New York City, let me tell you what the top 10 new industries are going to be and going to be invested in over the next 2 decades in New York City, or Colorado, or California. And I think it's that type of information that's going to serve our students so much better, so that when they graduate, the likelihood of them getting a job and being better prepared for that new industry is going to open up so many more doors for our students to be successful. And so those are some ways that I think, and opportunities that I think our career centers can really take advantage of. Finally, again, I want to just thank everyone for having these important conversations. I really appreciate the focus on the report that was done through the Chancellor's office and the new industries, because again, this is where I believe we need a much more intentional and a much more purposeful and meaningful way focus and guide our students towards you know, their future careers and ultimately their future success. So thank you very, very much. I have to get back to another conference, but again, thank you.